them having to raise children on their own, which I think is criminal.
Black women are not allowed to show any emotion because if we do, it's always problematic.
I was raised by two white, affluent gay men. I was adopted at 7 months from Chicago. We moved to Los Angeles when I was 4, and I grew up in very white communities all my life.
There were always standards put in place by my grandmother. She's very conservative. She's a pastor's wife, so she already has like all these parameters set in place when I'm born. So I was raised with a beautiful example of a Black woman, and I patterned myself as her. It wasn't anything forced upon me. It was sort of like an inspiration almost.
I had a middle class upbringing. Both of my parents have been married since the 70s, 1977. I've got 2 younger sisters, and I grew up in neighborhoods where I was a minority.
When I was younger, I was teased for being light-skinned. As a teenager, unfortunately, I perpetuated a lot of stereotypes of how I thought Black women should act because I wanted to be accepted by Black people. And when I think about it, it's like terrible because perpetuating those stereotypes may have reinforced them in people who weren't familiar with Black people.
My mother raised me, but as the years went by and I got older, a lot of other women started to raise me too.
I used to really have a hard time with being Black enough for the Black kids, but not too Black for the white kids, to scare the white kids off. Like, that used to be a thing for me. And so I used to code switch often. So when I was at school, I would talk really properly, and then when I was at home or at church with, I went to a mostly Black church, I tried to talk like the people there talked. When I got to about high school, I kind of quit that. That got really tiring.
I grew up in a situation with a single mother. The most vivid memories are like living in a building where my family owned the building, but it wasn't like a blood family, but they were like these 2 big apartments buildings that were connected together. So it's like the type of apartments where you can leave your door open because you know that somebody else is gonna watch your child. Or like if you at work, you know that like just to be like, oh, look out for Lex while I'm at work. It was one of those type of situations. And then once we moved from off the block, it became a situation where I started to watch out for myself while my mother was at work.
Growing up as a Black woman, especially a light-skinned Black woman, I did not feel comfortable at all because I wasn't Black enough for my Black friends and I was too Black for white people and like anyone else. But now I'm like insanely comfortable and I love being Black and I wouldn't change it for the world.
The only time people wake up and are aware of their Blackness and aware of the systems that are placed before them is that one of their parents raised them that way. A lot of the generation that we come from, our parents aren't quote-unquote conscious. So unless your parents are aware of their Blackness and come from a family that is aware of their Blackness, then you're not going to know. So to shame someone that hasn't recognized what's happening to them instead of what they're doing to themselves, you can't demean or oppress nobody else because you're just as bad as your oppressor.
I went to boarding school in Massachusetts and I got into an argument with a Black girl from New Jersey because I felt like she didn't act Black. And yes, it was terrible. And I think back to that argument and because we were 14 when this argument happened, and she was a lot more comfortable in her skin as a Black, young lady than I was in mine. So she kept asking me, what do you mean I don't act Black? What does it mean to act Black? She was really trying to pry out of me like the stereotypes that I had ingrained over wanting to be accepted for so long. And I guess that specific situation really meant a lot for me because when I grew up, it sort of clicked in my mind and was like, okay, what does it mean to be Black? It doesn't mean anything. You're just a person. And granted, you have a culture, but there aren't certain actions or certain things that you do like as a Black person to act Black, if that makes any sense.
We call women Earth. You know what I'm saying? It's just the mother of all creation. Black man is first. Man probably was woman. You know, you can't really have birth without a woman, though both man and woman play a part. That's why women are called earth.
All the black women in my family are seen as motherly figures. I think this whole stigma of like the mammy has carried in our society, but quite honestly, I think black women naturally want to be supportive. They naturally want to be motherly. They naturally want to take in the kids in the neighborhood and feed them and give them a place to stay. Only because I believe that communal characteristic is within us.
Black women are mothers. We like to take care of people. We like to feel like people need us, and that we're sometimes the reason why people are succeeding or that people are well fed. It doesn't necessarily feed the ego, but it's just knowing that we can tell somebody else that they can reach out to us even if we can't necessarily reach out to us.
Black woman's love for her child and for her unit and for how she progresses the world through her family is greater than anything else, because I can't name any race of woman who works harder to build up their children than black women.
You know, they leave these children with all these women with all these children and whatnot. I mean, you know, and they got to be the breadwinner and all. I mean, so their anger is not unfounded.
I think it's so easy to label black women as angry because it's so easy to point out what they've been through and the struggles they've endured. But it's also just as important to point out all the things black women have achieved in history in America. So I personally don't view black women as angry and domineering and just so dominant 24/7. I see their figure as something beautiful, as something that should be appreciated more. Their attitude is something so easily to label them as, but it should never define them. It shouldn't define the masses. Black women are not angry.
Black women as angry black women make me really upset because we're not angry all the time. It's just everything that we do is just perceived that way because people believe that black women are angry. Black women are not allowed to show any emotion because if we do, it's always problematic.
If your loved one was angry, you wouldn't just be like, ugh, they're just angry, you know, whatever. Instead of just writing them off, you probably go, okay, why are you angry? What's underneath that anger? Underneath that anger is probably a little bit of frustration, some hurt, and, you know, some other things going on in there. And I think that's where, that's the conversation that needs to be had, not why black women are so angry. Like, it's not that simple.
A lot of people talk about black women being angry and they don't want to deal with their attitudes or something like that. Maybe they just not dealing with what you got to do. You know, of course there are gonna be some angry ones who maybe they went through something in their childhood or something like that kind of needs to be understood or thought about. Don't just call somebody or write somebody off as angry, but maybe it's strength. Maybe you just can't deal with that strength.
Some black women like to be called bitches and hoes. And as much as I would like to not see that happen, I feel like I can't knock that. I like to be called the queen. But because she wants to be called a bitch doesn't necessarily make us any different. We just have different values. And I feel like even in wanting to be called a bitch, somewhat deep down in my heart, I feel like they don't really want to be called a bitch. But I've had conversations and I've seen things and I've experienced some black women just like to be called a bitch, and some black women like to be a hoe, or quote unquote, they like to be a hoe for the right reasons or for the right person.
What is a hoe? If a man is doing the same thing, he's not a hoe. If a man is confident, if he's assertive, he's not a bitch. It's the opposite.
Because as a black woman, I don't consider myself a bitch or a hoe. I believe that we always put, or not we as black women, but people often put women of other cultures and other races on a higher pedestal than they do black women. So when I hear of black women as bitches and hoes, it just really reiterates the idea for me.
The B word or the H word, I won't use that word because I have sisters and I have a mother. And I wouldn't want somebody using that when they was talking about my family.